Hello, I'm Dan Graham, the head of communications at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Welcome to a special edition of the Geneva Graduate Institute's In Conversation With podcast series. In this series, we'll be exploring a range of critical issues shaping Africa's future, with more episodes to come as we continue to dive into this important topic. This series offers in-depth discussions on the challenges and opportunities facing the continent today. Hosted by Eric Degila, Professor of Practice of International Relations, Interdisciplinary Programs, and visiting faculty in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the Geneva Graduate Institute, this series examines Africa's most pressing challenges, from social justice to economic development, and African contributions in the reshaping of a new world order through conversations with leaders, policymakers, and experts. In this inaugural episode, the special guest is His Excellency Gilbert Houngbo, Director General of the International Labour Organization. With his extensive background in global governance, His Excellency Houngbo offers a unique perspective on labor rights, economic inequality, and social justice, critical topics not only for Africa, but also for the global community. This episode addresses the global understanding of social justice within the African context, how labor rights and economic inequality intersect, the impact of the informal economy, and the urgent need to tackle youth unemployment. Additionally, the discussion covers the ILO's collaboration with African governments and Africa's role in reshaping global governance following recent discussions at the UN Summit of the Future. Listen in for valuable insights into how Africa can navigate its path towards social justice and economic inclusion.
Good morning, Your Excellency Gilbert Houngbo, Director General of ILO, and welcome in this Africa podcast series.
Thank you so much for having me.
Given your extensive experience and current role as Director General of ILO, how do you perceive the global understanding of social justice, particularly in the context of Africa? Are there unique challenges that the continent faces compared to other regions?
Well, first of all, the challenge in terms of social justice is across the world. All regions are facing deficit in terms of social justice, be it in the global north or the south, developed, not to developed countries, etc. However, each region, each country may have some peculiarity given its own situation, which is the case for our motherland in Africa. The challenge we have in Africa is the fact that the social justice challenges are compound with the endemic poverty that we are fighting, and they have and they have not, and all that entails with it in terms of inequalities, lack of basic services. So the case in Africa is even deeper and much more ingrained because of the development challenge we face.
Thank you for these important remarks. So you know that economic inequality is a significant barrier to social justice in many African nations. What role do you believe labor rights and fair employment practices play in addressing this inequality? And I would like to listen to you, if you allow me, how can ILO better support African countries in strengthening these rights?
First of all, it's important to know that all the work that ILO is doing is contributing to a better social justice. This is why in our constitution, dated 1919, we clearly state that there is no lasting peace without social justice. So to respond to your question, the nexus between the labor right, the labor standard, and the social justice is very well established. And I'll give you just pragmatic, concrete example. If we are fighting as part of our core conventions, you have the fight against discrimination, which that discrimination can happen at the salary level. For example, when we know that on average, women still earn 20 to 23% less than men for equal job done on that. So by fighting against that type of discrimination, we are contributing to a better justice, a better social justice. Another example is the need for minimum floors in terms of social protection. And this is one of the major challenges we have, and ILO is working on in the continent. As I'm speaking, worldwide, we have 3.8 billion citizens that have zero protection. And we have the same situation, obviously, in our continent as well. Unfortunately, I must add, because we are working with the government, trying to see how the fiscal space can be arranged, can be improved. We even have some pilot countries where we are combining our effort with the International Monetary Fund, IMF. And by bringing in a minimum protection in terms of social protection, that automatically contributes to alleviate the suffering and to protect the citizens and the workers. Another example is the fact that our current data show that worldwide we have 243 million people that are working, that are workers full-time, yet cannot pay the bills. So that's why we talk about the working pools. So by ILO fighting to make sure that, and we are really, in the past 18 months or so, we have been stepping up our effort in terms of the living wage and living income for every household. And this is a work in progress that ILO is also engaged, not only with the social partners in terms of trade union or employees organization, but also with the private sector directly. And this, I know, is going to take time, but that is also part of the work we're doing. Another thing also that ILO is working with on the African continent is the youth employment. If it's true that by 2050, 1 in 4 citizens in this world very likely will be from Africa, we also know ILO estimates more than 75 million youngsters will adapt to the workforce. It could be a dividend, but also could be a challenge for us. So this is also the focus on that is also what we are working on the continent.
Thank you very much. And you raised the critical issue of youth. Let me perhaps ask you how you see social justice as a driver to align with opportunities of new jobs and to prevent social unrest in the continent.
No, very clearly, you're touching on a core issue that, and again, let me go back to the preamble of our Constitution, no lasting peace. And that peace is not just only peace out of a war, or it can also be peace out of civil unrest. Of course, none of us really want to see social unrest, but that's the danger. If you don't aim for a better social justice, even in developed countries. So it doesn't matter if you are poor or rich country or community, but if the inequalities, the gaps within the community are so wide, that creates frustration. And that could be source of unrest from the society. This is why we say that no, we also have to be preemptive by ensuring that. And it's not only is it a matter of moral consideration, it's also a matter of peace of mind and the right thing to do in the society we are living. So it's not easy. Social justice is very wide. There's so many components to it. However, each one of us has, in my view, the obligation, be it a moral obligation, to every day try to push the envelope in one dimension of a better social justice.
Thank you for your very strong remarks on this critical issue. Director General, you know that the informal economy is a major component of African economies, often with limited labor protections. What strategies can be implemented to ensure that workers in the informal sector are included in a broader framework of social justice?
Well, first of all, the informal economy is quite another challenge that we are facing. I must say in almost all the region, and particularly since COVID, because we know that all the effort that not only ILO, but all the stakeholders have been doing since in the 15 years preceding COVID has started yielding a result where we saw the informal economy progressively reducing, i.e. being formalized. But the situation has worsened, I'm afraid, since COVID on that. Particularly in Africa, we're talking about, on average, 83% of their economy that is in the informal setting.
83%.
83 on average, 80% for men and 87% for women on that. So it's a huge consideration. For us, we don't necessarily say that, okay, the informal sector shall be disbanded and automatically it will be a bit unreal, it will take time. However, we need to start putting in measure policies to facilitate, for example, the registration machinery, the registration of new businesses. I mean, a lot of countries has made progress on that. We saw a situation where it used to take months or weeks to have the registration done. And now in several countries, you could do it in less than 3 days. And even in some countries, within 1 day, you can be registered. So we are progressing on that, and we need to step up on those progress in terms of registration. I also think that it's going to be important to make sure that we provide tax incentives for the informal workers. We need to make sure that our tax policies do not end up inadvertently penalizing or overtaxing those that are at the bottom of the pyramid, which could chase them away from being registered. But it is also important for us to ensure that we help organize the workers or the entrepreneurs in the informal economy, so organize themselves and to be much more successful and to be able to better respond to the challenge they are facing. And talking about the challenge they are facing, the one you were mentioning is the social protection. It is really to ensure that they have a minimum protection, health insurance coverage, or any kind of basic coverage for their children, for their families. And the government policies in working with them, you have to also be very careful that not just a top-down approach, but in working with the actors of the informal economy is going to be important to come with those minimum protections that could be very helpful. The last point maybe comes to my mind in terms of what do we do in formalizing the informal economy is the capacity development. Particularly in the context of progress that we have in technology, and not only to train them in technology, but also to ensure how do we make it as easy as possible access to technology.
Thank you so much. ILO is a well-established international organization, and ILO, under your leadership, is promoting strongly social justice. But how does your organization collaborate with African governments to promote more social justice in Africa and to deal with the most pressing policy change in order to have tangible progress in the region?
You know very well the cooperation between ILO and Africa countries is a long historical cooperation since the independence, and that is there to continue on that. First of all, one important dimension is the advocacy that we're doing to ensure that countries ratify the labor conventions and help them based on request. ILO always stand ready to help them to implement those conventions that they have ratified. And I want to insist, obviously, on what we call the fundamental conventions, from freedom of association, collective bargaining, the fight against child labor, forced labor, or the discrimination, the fight against discrimination that I referred to, the occupational safety and health, and obviously the protection that we have been talking about. So if you look at the important for us is the focus of ratification and implementation of the labor standard. And over that is also important, particularly, as I said, in the continent, the two major priorities that we see and that we are working on is the social protection and the youth employment. In the coming days, in the coming months, I will not be surprised that we will be certainly start looking at that from the already here or upcoming artificial intelligence and its impact on the labor markets and the policies.
also in Africa.
As well, of course.
Thank you for this great remark. Last week, world leaders met in New York to discuss the UN Summit of the Future and its Act. I know that you contributed to several conversations there. What main contribution from Africa do you see in reshaping global governance in times of uncertainty?
Africa in the past years has already been quite very present and very dynamic, which I'm very pleased to see. And I can tell you that in my current responsibility, I have the privilege to witness different matters where Africa is quite very we saw it again during the process of the approval of the declaration of the Summit of the Future, where the Africa Group has been quite very decisive in positively assisting in solving the last-minute problem or challenges that they faced 10 days ago when during the, I believe it was Sunday 22nd on that. So you could see that Africa voice, Africa diplomacy is higher than ever. Let's be very clear. And that I can only encourage that. And we know there's still a lot of discussion, even in terms of governance in my own institution here in ILO or in the reform of the UN. There's also a lot of discussion in terms of the reform of the global financial architecture that will be, I suspect, central to the upcoming financing for development in Sevilla, in Spain. So the whole interrogation and the whole challenge or re-questioning the multilateralism that we are facing on that, and the Africa voice is quite very respected, I have to say. And for me, we as an African, we just have to continue in that progress and looking at how that progress benefits to our people.
Thank you so much. These are great remarks. Talking about our people, and it will be my last question. What do you think about the specific category of farmers in rural region in Africa in terms of social justice? I know how this group of population is important to you. And so I would like to listen to you on how you see pathways to support them.
It's very clear, you're right, that when we talk about rural communities, it's very close to me for many reasons. First of all, for my own history, but also because we know statistically, factually, we know that poverty is even more acute in the rural area than in the urban area. Although the urban area, the situation can be dramatic, but we know that most of the poor still live in the rural area. In the cities, in the urban area, we talk about insufficient level of the services. But in the rural area, I'm afraid, very often we talk about inexistence of the basic service, the right to school, to education, the right to water, and having minimum health centers and services are available. All of those are crucial, and the hardship of the work, and this is where we are quite very concerned in ILO. And on top of that, given the whole societal also dynamic, very often the burden is harder on women, on men, and the risk of child labor is of concern, because you know that child labor predominantly is in agriculture sector, which is the main activity in our rural area in Africa. So all of that is obviously of specific concern to me.
Thank you very, very much, Your Excellency Gilbert Houngbo, for being with us in this Africa podcast series. And I wish you all the best in this very tremendous commitment for social justice.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you for listening to Professor Eric Degila's insightful interview with His Excellency Gilbert Houngbo, Director General of the International Labour Organization. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to stay tuned for future episodes in this series.